here to the discussion today. Andreas, do you want to give yourself a quick intro?
Yeah, I'm Andres Fonseca. I'm one of the founders at Thrive. I'm the CEO and I'm a consultant psychiatrist by background. And yeah, I'm very grateful to have you all here to talk about this topic. I think we can have some nuanced discussion, which is what I think is
Yeah,
missing in a lot of times when we talk about these topics.
yeah, 100%. And I think it will very much take that format. We'll try and engage with you as much as we can during the session. We've got around an hour, just under now together. Um, so broadly speaking, you don't have to absorb all of these bullet points, but we're going to be taking a look at the wellness industry, which is a gigantic industry now, encompassing many facets. And there are many good things about that, and there are potentially some bad things. And we are going to attempt to have a nuanced discussion, bringing to light some of the merits of the wellness industry, some of the consequences, and for a brief point, looking back at the history and where some of these notions have developed from. So we'll have a look a bit, we'll set the scene essentially, a little bit of context, and then we'll move into thinking about how this industry is potentially impacting mental health. And we will talk about some of the things that individuals consider. We'll get a perspective from Andreas as a clinician, and we'll also get your thoughts and give you a bit of feedback on those and highlight some of the things that organizations can consider when we're thinking about wellness, when we're thinking about employee well-being. Um, so hopefully a nice discussion for us today. You'll get a copy of the slides, you'll get the recording, and we actually highlight another recording within this session itself, which we will share the details of post-webinar, usually pretty quickly uploaded, not taking too much demands on our marketing team there, Ella, but onto our YouTube channel, and we do send round that to every participant, the recording of the webinar. So let's start here a little bit, just make sure we can get our Slido working. So we've started the ball rolling, but essentially you can scan that QR code, and we want to start just to get a flavor from people in the room. What do you feel? What does the word wellness mean to you? And you can see we started the ball rolling with relaxing there, but welcome your participation. If you haven't got the QR code to scan, you can go onto slido.com and then you just need to put in that hashtag there. Cool. So balance. And I think that's a key word for this discussion
I like
generally.
balance, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Um,
Health, of course, yeah.
yeah. Mindfulness, certainly something that um, would feed in and be present when we think about wellness. Um, Prioritizing energy and health, exercise,
Yeah.
core component. We've got the physical and mental, good mental health there as well.
Good
Overall
health, health.
well-being, autonomy. And I think that's a key point. And also we'll try and look at the individual's responsibility as well as the employer's responsibility when we think about looking after ourselves. Laughter. Good to see that
Mm.
one there. Yeah, 100%.
Uh,
Healthy eating. Yeah.
and acceptance is one that is an interesting one.
Hmm.
I think there's something about that. Yeah.
Yeah. I think there's a really nice, healthy balance that I think reflects um reflects the nature of this discussion here. Just seeing if there's any other ones a little bit more left field. But yeah, no, thank you for participating in that. There's a good sort of cross section of how people feel about wellness
Yeah.
here. Um, so we'll move on, and not my definition, but the Global Wellness Institute. And I just wanted to pick out a couple of things in this. So the Global Wellness Institute defines wellness as the active pursuit of activities, choices, and lifestyles that lead to a state of holistic health. So I think the first thing to point out here is this notion that wellness is not necessarily a passive or a static state, and that there's this active pursuit of choosing activities, looking after yourself, lifestyle factors, things that you can drive as an individual to influence how you feel. And I guess the second sort of core component, as I see it, is that wellness is linked to holistic health. So, as we saw on the Slido, people have this appreciation that there are various things that allow to bring balance to your life and to your health and well-being. So it extends beyond the physical health, for example. So yeah,
Yeah.
two things really that kind of jump out for me here. That notion of an individual sort of pursuit. This is an active pursuit of being healthy, if you like, and also that there are many different components that make up health. If you have anything else on your side, Andreas, to kind of reflect.
No, just going back to what people were putting on the slide. I think they landed on many of these because I think we had quite a few activities there, like exercise, mindfulness, and there were quite a few other things that were active in the things that
Mm,
people were typing. So I think they covered that, and obviously health was a very big one, and I think people highlighted that is not just physical health, that is every component of health.
mm.
Yeah, quite a few people mentioned that in the slide. So I think we have a very good basis for the discussion. Yeah.
Y- Yeah. One other angle I was just thinking about is I don't know if this is too crude and too simplistic, but if you think about um, I don't know, at one end of a spectrum, you've got patients engaging in treatment in a reactive
Yeah.
way. And at the other end of things, you've got potentially we'll talk about prevention in a minute, but a more proactive way of engaging in healthy activities that may or may not prevent some of these things that require treatment down the line. So I think on one end, you've got okay, I'm reactive, I'm not feeling good, I'm going to go and seek help. On the other end, you've got, I'm going to do something for myself in a proactive, potentially preventative way,
Mhm.
um, is maybe another
Yeah,
way to look at it.
and I think that somebody mentioned building resilience as a component of it, which is yeah, fair enough. Yeah.
100%. So, yeah, I think there's a few things from my perspective, and again, this is from the Global Wellness Institute. Some milestones of note, and I think here, and as we chatted, Andreas, before the webinar, it's important to point out some of the many good things that have come about as a result of this of the attention on wellness. But actually, the sort of key principles go back thousands of years. You know, many of the sort of preventative and holistic ways of looking at the mind, the body, the soul, and looking after our health are not new inventions. These things have been happening for a while, but along the way, the industry has become bigger and bigger and encapsulates all sorts of things. And I will have to read this because it was $6.8 trillion industry, apparently, the
Yep.
wellness industry. So anything from retreats to anti-aging creams, through to gyms, through to supplements, nutrition, and even considering psychological health as well. So, you only have to, it's a reflection that I've had. The younger people coming through, and this is a generalization, typically university, okay, we go there, we drink, we have a good time. There's a lot more health conscious individuals where, the rise of more non-alcoholic bars, things like that, like people are investing a lot more in well-being and health generally, particularly among the younger generation. So I think this move towards wellness and looking after ourselves is only gathering momentum. But within that, and I think the UN's World Happiness Report, I think that was one of the things, Andreas, you said,
Yeah,
good thing. Um,
definitely.
and then maybe there are other considerations on here that maybe not so healthy in that respect. And I don't know whether you want to give any views on those or
Yeah, no, I mean it's interesting that the Global Wellness Institute has this graphic where it has very things that are proven to be very conducive to improving your health. I mean, for example, legislation to try and curb obesity and diabetes, very important. It's a very important global objective, continues to be an area of focus. The World Happiness Report, I think that was a good milestone. But you also have things that are very clearly proven to be placebos, like homeopathy. So yes, they do have the placebo effect, which is nothing to be sneezed at, but they have the problems that it might lead you to do things that you believe are conducive to improving your health, when you do need an actual intervention, and stopping you from actually having the real intervention that is going to help you at that point. So yes, the again, the placebo effect, nothing to be sneezed at. It's actually quite important to be able to invoke it in some occasions, and is very helpful. But on the other hand, if you do have a condition that actually does require some active treatment, and you're neglecting that treatment because you are taking a homeopathic remedy, or somebody that you're consulting with is recommending that, it could delay treatment and it could cause problems. So that's kind of the point there. I'm also interested to see here that at no point it mentions exercise, which is like a
Mm.
very big component. At no point it mentions the protection of sleep, which is again a very, very big component in my mind of wellness. So there's quite a few things that are, I think, also missing from this chart that are actually very, very important and helpful to building your wellness. Yeah,
Perfect. Thank you, Andres. Great film for those of you that have seen it. Good, the bad, and the ugly. Um,
very much agree.
so
Yes.
yeah, I can't pronounce the director's name though, so I'm not gonna do it. Um,
Ennio Morricone, I
there
think.
you go. There
Yeah.
you go. Um, the good, the bad, and the ugly. Yeah. So the good. So let's have a think about, and this is not an exhaustive list here. Let's have a think about prevention. So we hear a lot about prevention. A lot of the clients we speak with, from the NHS through to insurers, through to employers, they're all thinking about, how can we prevent some of these things happening? What is the message of prevention? And with the benefit of Andreas, maybe we can start here. So, with a perspective of mental health, how do you view prevention and its new potential nuances?
Yeah, I mean the issue there is that prevention is always quite difficult to establish. And if I may, I'll just explain very briefly why it's difficult to establish whether something is having a good effect, a good preventative effect. For that to actually be objectively provable, what you need is you need a group of people, right? So you start with a very large, it has to be a very, very large group of people. And what you do is you put in an intervention that you think is going to help, is going to prevent the incidents, one of these conditions to come on, right? So
Mm,
to the onset of one of these conditions to happen, right? That's what you're trying to see. So you have a very large group of people and you divide it into two randomly, yeah, and then you do the preventative intervention in one side randomly, and you
mhm,
don't do it on the other side, and then you have to wait long enough to see if there's a difference between those groups. And what you're looking at is one group more likely to have this condition than the other. So you're looking at new cases of this condition because otherwise you're not showing anything about prevention. So you're looking at the rate of new cases in one arm versus the other. Okay. And because of, I mean, actually in mental health, some conditions are quite frequent. Anxiety and depression are very frequent. But still, you do need a long time of observation, regular observation, to prove that you have actually done something that is actually helping uh, some of those cases that would have happened not happen, if that makes
mm,
sense. So that's the trouble. The trouble is the length of time of observation, which is, I mean, when we tried to do it in Thrive, we needed a commitment from our partners for over a year of observation of a cohort of about 10,000 people. Yeah, where we would do some of these things, and we couldn't actually do that practically. It's very expensive to run, very difficult to implement, and actually requires quite a lot of commitment from those people that you enroll in the study at the beginning, because it
mm,
might be about doing something like exercise, for example, that actually has some proven benefits already. So it's quite difficult to show prevention across the board. What we have is the best guess based on other observations, and we have some strong signals from some interventions and some weaker signals from some interventions. The principle is, some are very, for example, exercise. Exercise is very clearly beneficial, not just for your physical health, but also your mental health. The protection of your sleep, sleeping well, again, very clearly proven to, if you have a problem with sleeping and you tackle that, you are going to prevent mental health conditions from happening, and you're also going to prevent physical health conditions from happening. Very clear. And then there's other things that we think are helpful and don't look like they're going to be harmful, so that they're not so invasive that they're going to create a problem, that are worth doing on the off chance that is going to sort of reduce your chances of having one of these conditions, but we don't know for sure, if that makes sense. Some of
Mm.
these are meditation. So meditation, we know that long-time practitioners who are very, very skilled and have devoted their lives to doing this do have benefits. But we don't know whether that's because they have particular personal characteristics that made them choose this, made them put the effort into this, that also protect them from the mental health condition, or whether the actual thing that they're doing is the thing that is protecting them, if that makes sense. So it could be that they are very disciplined, and that is the thing that helps them, or that they're very resilient naturally, and that is the thing that is helping them. Or it could be that it's actually the practice that they're doing. So it's quite hard to tease those two things apart for the reasons that I said. But it doesn't look like it's harmful, if you know what I mean. So dedicating your time to that is probably worthwhile, although we cannot really say for sure. Yeah, so there's some very clear things in nutrition that we do know. So if you have a deficit of something, and if we do a blood test and we discover a problem, those deficits, for example, if you have a deficit of vitamin B12, that's going to result in some mental health conditions being more prevalent, for sure. So if we detect it and we treat it, we prevent those. Very clear, very, very clearly established. If you have a normal diet and you don't have any deficits, and I do a blood test and we don't see any problems, is it worth taking some supplements? Maybe, maybe not. Probably not in some cases. And also, taking excessive supplements of certain kinds can be toxic in itself, can create its own problem. So that's the difficulty there in terms of prevention. Yes, generally good idea. There's some things that are very clear. Many things are, we think, is a best guess that they might be helpful, but it's also important to make sure that what you're doing to prevent things are not themselves causing a problem, if that makes sense. Yeah.
So a follow on to that then. So, and maybe it's nuanced, so it's not an easy answer to give, but what might be some of the most defensible activities, whether it's therapy, treatment, to an individual that has a more mild presentation of a mental
Mm.
health condition to potentially prevent them deteriorating, become more severe symptoms, complex? Is there anything that's kind of defensible, or is it broadly, investigate the issue, see if you need treatment, and then we'll treat that issue? Is there anything that you can kind of stand behind to say, yeah, these sort of activities could stop that potentially deteriorating if you engage in practice in them?
Yeah, I mean, again, it's going to sound very basic, but yeah. So if you have a mild case, I'll always say, even if the case is mild, and if you have it within you, I think it's worth consulting every time, and hopefully you're going to sort of consult somebody that is going to have a balance and nuanced position. Is not going to treat for the sake of treatment, going to sort of decide what is the best approach. And in many cases, it might be doing nothing very much or very little, and it might be about those very basics, getting right those basics, getting right your sleep, your exercise, your managing your weight, and those things are just going to be enough to actually overcome the problem, right? Increasing your social activity, that seem to be a big component. So there's this actually mode of treatment is called behavioral activation, that actually works when you're treating depression, but there's nothing wrong with doing it otherwise, which is being active, being engaged, finding something meaningful to do, finding community. Those things are very, very, again, we have very clear evidence that those are preventative, and they sound very simple, but they are quite powerful. In terms of any particular interventions that you might do, if you have the discipline for it, you could do a self-guided CBD program when you have a mild condition, and it could be very successful for you. We do know. So from experiments where we have a mild case and the person is able to follow through, which is the difficult part, follow through to
Mm,
the end, they do get a clear benefit and they do learn the skills, and those are preventative in the future, very clearly. But the problem is actually mustering the willpower to go through it, because it is they are effortful. So
mm,
nothing, I mean, okay, nothing that is going to work is going to be easy or free of any effort. So I'm saying exercise. Exercise has some effort. Managing and having a healthy diet that requires some effort. Making sure that you have the right amount of sleep that requires some effort. Making the effort to get out of your house and go to a club or go to somebody to meet people, play some board games with, yeah, I don't know, whatever it is that requires some effort on your part. Everything you got to have fun, and it's going to be enjoyable, but you have to get there. Many people tell me that, okay, motivating themselves to get to the gym is difficult, but once they're there and once they do it, they feel amazing. But you have to
mm.
get there, right? So this is similar. If you're able to do it, then yes, you do reap the benefits. But for the most part, is just getting the basics right. I know it sounds boring and I know it sounds very silly, but if you do it right, it does cost you some effort, and you will reap those benefits. But as I said, probably what we can do at the very mild end is some of those self-guided programs. If you're able to follow them, if you're able to commit to them, you do get some benefits, definitely.
Excellent. One of the points, although I might hold it for the next slide, was just what you said there. Treat for the sake of treating or treatment.
Yeah.
And we'll come on to that when we think about seeking help and how the
Okay.
industry and potentially, yeah, how this industry is, burgeoned, is much, much bigger than it ever was. And it encompasses so many things, including thinking about psychological health, and some of the potential pitfalls of the way that the industry can work, in respect of treatment. And I think the point was, and I don't know how much unpacking it needs, but the effortful point,
Yeah.
for those that haven't possibly gone through therapy, there may be a perception that it's actually the therapist that's doing everything and helping you get better. Whereas, as we know, there's a lot required of the individual, just like you said, with all those effortful activities, whether that's getting up and going to the gym or engaging in therapy, it requires a lot of work from the individual.
It
Um,
does. Yeah.
yeah. Um,
Yeah, I mean, people understand it better when you talk about physiotherapy. So if you have an injury and you're recovering from that injury and you go to the physiotherapist is not going to massage you well. I mean, you may have that in your mind, but that's not the way it works. The physiotherapist is going to assess you and assign a number of exercises that you must complete in order
yeah.
to regain and recover your strength and your mobility and your function. But you must do them. So the physiotherapist is not going to do them for you.
Mm.
The physiotherapist can assess you and can tell you what the best exercises for you are, but you still must do them. Therapy is very similar to that. You know, can assess you, can guide you, can help you, can tell you, can give you advice about what to do, but you still need to do it, if that makes sense. Yeah.
It definitely does. It resonates with me. And I'm sure if we did a poll, there'd be many people that said they didn't do their exercises when they were assigned by their physio. And we got a couple of comments in the chat there around the supplements and things like that. So,
Yeah.
I've definitely bought into that as well. And I think, we are marketed to so
That's the thing.
much.
Yeah.
And so it's
Yeah. And,
hard to not, you know,
definitely. I
get
mean,
get hit by it.
yeah, the problem there is the incentives, right? So I am incentivized if I am consulting with you. I am incentivized to do something because then I can charge you for it, right? So do you see what I mean? So if you come to a consultation with me, that's always my worry, that the incentives are set up in such a way that as a clinician, I am incentivized to do something rather than do nothing. And sometimes it might be better to do nothing, and that's quite a hard message to deliver, but it's also hard on my own finances as your well-being provider of choice, if you know what I mean. So that's
Mm,
that's the difficulty there, and that's a difficult problem to disentangle. And if I can sell you something rather than tell you, look, what you need to do is exercise better, have fun with your friends, you know,
mm,
do those social things that are important, get out of your house, eat well, which doesn't cost you any extra money. and an exercise, which you can just do, then I'm not making any money. Whereas if I sell you a bunch of supplements, I will be making quite a lot of money actually. There,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah. Okay, we're going to move on. The final point to mention before we do is around this corporate culture transformation. So,
yeah,
for us, we do see many well-intentioned employers that we work with who do recognize the importance of ensuring that employees are supported. I mean, fundamentally, it also has to do, and we'll cover this later, with ensuring that, job descriptions, roles are understood, people have the resources to do their job. There are things that will contribute to potential problems, which are responsibility of the employer and the employee to raise when they're having challenges. So it's a two-way street. Um, but also the potential danger of kind of over vigilance. You kind of mentioned today, always keeping an eye on being this or that and being overly obsessive potentially
yeah,
with these things. Again, all about balance. Um,
yeah, exactly. I don't know
cool.
if we're making that point a little bit later, but that overvigilance point is an important one. Yes, it's important to be aware. It's important to bring it up. It's important to seek help when you need to seek help. But the flip side of that is if you're constantly checking on yourself and saying, "Am I okay? Am I okay? Am I okay? Am I okay?" That again, we
Mm,
have good evidence that that is actually harmful in that it increases your risk rather than decrease it. If you have that hypervigilance and you're constantly checking in with yourself, "Am I okay or not?" That seems to be
mm,
a new problem that is born out of this wellness culture that sort of like asks you to sort of check with yourself all the time, which might be not that helpful. Yeah.
Is it in most typical cases in individuals, is it too simplistic to say when you're okay? You don't need to check. Like
Yeah, I think so. I think you sometimes you might be in a state of slight denial, because for whatever reason you find it hard to accept that. But
yeah,
in your heart of hearts,
yeah,
you do know that there's something going on. You might
yeah,
you might be you might be denying it. You might be saying no, it's going to get better, and I'm going to push through. But you do know that there's
yeah,
something not quite right. When it comes
yeah.
to mental health, I mean, there's other physical health conditions that are worthwhile
Of
checking with your
course.
GP regularly and all of that and go through the screening for that. That makes sense. But you do know whether you're emotional. Um, okay, there's some extreme cases in which you don't know. You don't have any awareness of your illness, but you have to be
Mm,
extremely unwell for that to happen. If you
mm,
know what I mean. Paradoxically, it's not when you're mildly unwell when that happens. It's when you're really, really, really unwell, when you lose the awareness that there is a problem. So in that respect, I think you do know, and it is reasonable to seek help. And also it's reasonable to seek help and accept that you might be reassured by a well-meaning clinician that maybe there's no intervention needed at this point, and some general measures might be sufficient. But you also sort of must
mm.
keep an eye on it to make sure that it doesn't get any worse, as we said before. You know what I mean? So again,
Yeah,
it's nuanced, it's balanced, and is not. I cannot give you like a very clean answer, like a very clear rule of thumb. But
yeah,
in general, you do know, and in general, it does make sense to seek help. And in general, if you don't need a big, like very intrusive, very invasive intervention, it's better not to have it than to have it, if that makes sense. Yeah.
yeah. I'm thinking that if there's any kind of commonalities between what we're seeing here, but I mean, for me, again, it's about that, as you said, opportunity cost that, you can't always think your way out of an issue.
No,
Whatever mindset you may occupy, mindset makes a difference, but
it does.
this positive thinking, and there's many benefits to that. But it starts and stops at a certain point. And when we think about people with genuine mental health challenges, um, their thinking about the situation is important and their mindset is important, but it's not the be all and end all. So I think there's many things that the wellness industry can adversely impact on individuals and their mental health. And we've got a few different areas excuse me, where that may land and be considered here. Medical misinformation,
Definitely.
influencers, whoever that may be. Yeah, as it says in that final sort of sentence, often leaves vulnerable people to delay or forgo evidence-based medical treatment.
Yeah, that was my point earlier, and that is a real risk. And there's been some famous cases where that's happened. Unfortunately, where we have good evidence that that is what happened, that somebody you know did forgo the right treatment, favoring one of these other treatments that actually resulted in problems.
Right.
And that misinformation is a real worry, and it can spread very quickly, and it can even make kind of sense, and that's the most that's the most dangerous. And the problem is when it's kind of true what they're saying, if that makes sense. It's
Mm, mm,
some of the principles that they are invoking to give you the advice are actually real, but the
mm.
way they're presenting is distorted. Maybe in a subtle way, maybe in an overt way, but maybe in a subtle way, and you end up following advice that is actually harmful, even though it's based on things that we do know may be helpful. That is the what I see as the most dangerous component of it. And the question that I get about that is, well, how can I tell as an individual, whether is right or wrong? And it's actually quite a difficult question to answer, because it might be very nuanced. You see what I mean? It might be very subtle. What they're saying does have some validity, but they are smuggling in things or not saying certain things or presenting it as a always this thing is true, and it makes it very very difficult to give advice. And
Yeah.
again, so if you have somebody that is trusted, that is knowledgeable, um, is to do that, is to go for that advice, to try and sort of clarify the position. I think you've got some points there that you were making earlier that are worth mentioning very quickly. The shame and blame, I think that can be a real issue if you don't have the right attitude. That's why you're not recovering. And as you said before, some of these conditions actually do change your attitude, making it extremely difficult. That's why you do need support and help to overcome them. And then you might need quite active support from others at the very beginning. And then obviously you will take over and work on your own recovery eventually when you're ready for it. But at the beginning, you cannot really think yourself out of that problem by yourself entirely.
Mm,
That's very clear, and you're definitely going to need external support in those cases. And the thing about classism and privilege is what I was saying about incentives. But also, it's interesting that we know that some of the people that are most harmed by the quackery, I'm going to say, are the people with the most money. Yeah. I'm just going to briefly talk about a case of mine of a very, very affluent gentleman who actually had a problem with allergies as a child. Okay, and they misdiagnosed that as ADHD, right? And they treated both, so they gave him steroids for the for the allergies, which, yeah, I mean, he had access to all the doctors in the world, which is the
right.
most tragic thing here. Access to all the doctors in the world. They diagnosed these two things. Okay, so he was given that, and he was given stimulants. The stimulants resulted in him becoming quite unwell, quite mentally unwell. So he responded very badly to them. He became quite depressed, actually, as a result of those stimulants. But also he recovered because he was given treatment for the allergies, for the food allergies that he had. Now, when he
Mm,
became a teenager, he was struggling with exams. He reinvoked this dormant diagnosis of ADHD, and he was given stimulants again, and that resulted in him becoming an addict, I would say. I mean, very clearly. And then also, it resulted in him. He had a crisis because he was given continuous steroids because he had access to them until he was a teenager. Then he left home. He lost contact with his doctor. Nobody did it correctly. He stopped abruptly. He had a really bad time because of stopping abruptly those steroids. And then he basically has become dependent on those steroids as well. So he has what's called an Addison syndrome, but is caused by the doctors, not really because he's got a problem himself. So he has two
Mm.
problems that have been induced by having too many doctors giving him too much advice. And his parents were the best parents in the world, very well intentioned. And here we have a man that is actually quite impaired now because he's been giving access to all of this and actually is resulted in some very serious harm. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah. So that actual that call it affluence there, but that access to
Yeah.
diagnosis people to interpret what's going on for you actually has led counter has contributed to his
In his case,
challenges there.
definitely. I mean, 100%. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, okay. Back to the participant. So let's hear your thoughts. I've seen in the chat, I'm just catching up on some of the messages that are in the webinar chat now. Yeah, self-determination. So yeah, if you can just engage with this poll, please. So the worst wellness hack that you've seen. I'm always very skeptical of those. You go on the tube and you go up the escalators and you see the body transformations, and I mean they do happen. You can do it, but
They do.
so
I mean,
easy to Photoshop these things.
yeah, is the GLP-1s, which are
Yeah.
actually wonderful drugs. They're really good in diabetes where they were originally designed, right? Very good in
Mm,
diabetes. And actually in quite extreme obesity, they're extremely helpful. But now they're used in people that actually don't need diet injections, I think is what people are saying there. Yes, so I agree. So this is the problem with them. They are quite helpful and useful drugs. They are. They're really good for what they were originally designed for, but now they've been used and because they have this enormous market value, they're being used by people that actually don't have a problem. And by using them, they're causing themselves health problems. So
mm,
so 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 that's another example of that going wrong, right? So when it's indicated, is wonderful and is great. When it's not indicated, it creates big problems with Paltrow's recommendations. I mean, whoever tried that, I couldn't agree more. I couldn't agree more. Definitely, yeah, yeah. Unregulated CBD supplements, anti-fat pills. Yeah, I mean, I think people have a very clear idea. You do
yeah.
this for every day for 30 days and you'll be fabulous. Yeah, yeah,
The Tai Chi one, I'm getting a lot of adverts on YouTube for
yeah.
that. So
I mean, that's
we
that's
must
the
be being
thing.
tar
Is there
targeted.
anything wrong with Tai Chi? Not
No,
really.
right? Yeah,
No, I mean, it's a good form of exercise. I don't think it's a special in any way from any other forms of exercise. But again,
yeah,
it's sold like a panacea. Yeah. So that's yeah.
yeah,
Influenza vaccinations, collagen. Yeah. So this is I think is I suppose we're illustrating here some of the things that I was saying earlier. That some of these things have some validity, but they are extrapolated in a way that is quite unhelpful.
mm,
And it results in harmful practices. And because they have a monetary value, they're marketed and we have all these interventions where no intervention is really necessary. Yeah, I think some of the
yeah,
plastic surgery, yeah, yeah. I mean, I have big problems with plastic surgery myself. I think I'm going to say something very controversial. I think um, if you're a medic and you are doing something to healthy tissue, I don't know what you're doing. So I mean, what are you treating really? So I understand that people demand it. That makes perfect sense, and I don't judge people that say I want a nicer looking nose or anything like that. But me as a doctor doing something to healthy tissue, cutting into healthy tissue, I don't get. If you know what I mean. I would only do it, or not me, but people will only do it for money. That's the only reason, because there's no clinical reason to do it. See what I mean? There's no clinical justification for doing that.
mm,
You're not treating anything. Really bad, right? In
yeah.
my opinion. Yeah.
Maybe one for another day.
Yeah.
Cool. We're gonna move on. Thank you. There's a really good flavor of thoughts and feelings on
Yeah.
this.
Botox. Yeah.
Um, yeah.
Again, Botox, another one. If you have a neurological problem and you have a contraction, and you have no function in your limb, Botox is extremely helpful, right? And you do
Right.
need it, but for your wrinkles in your face, you're actually potentially doing some harm. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah. So let's spend a little bit of time. We're about, I would say, about just over half, maybe 60% through. So the yeah, moving beyond self-care. So we spoke a little bit about, well, I put the assertion out there that you kind of do know when you're not well from a mental health perspective, but there is nuance
yeah.
to that.
There's nuance.
Um, so when when is the right time? If an individual's thinking about maybe or maybe not seeking help for their mental health, what can they consider? And then maybe a little bit about the role of, the consultation and the merits of that, and this to treat or not treat
Yeah, I mean, I think,
consideration.
yeah, again, in an ideal world, I think your threshold for seeking help should be low, right? And the reason is, yeah, you feel that there's something wrong. You don't quite know what it is. You're not an expert. Why would you know? So you feel that there's something not quite right. Um, and it might be milder than you think, but how do you know? It's impossible for you to know, right? So it makes sense. And you might be very reasonably worried about, okay, so if I don't do anything about it now, it could get worse. And again, that's exactly the right thought. It's very reasonable to do that. Yeah. So,
Mm,
I mean, the things to look out for is, have I lost function in any way? So am I functioning at a lower level than I was before? And that is something that you might be able to sort of quite reasonably mention. So I was able to do these things, I'm not able to do them anymore. I feel like I'm not able to do them anymore, or not as efficiently. Fair enough. Um, is there anything that comes with any risk? So do I have any thoughts or any feelings that I think are linked to something that is quite risky, quite dark, maybe? That is another important signal. Even if it's very mild, even if it's occasional, even if it's fleeting, it might be an important signal not to ignore, if that makes sense. Yeah. And the other
mm,
thing is the level of distress that you're experiencing, and that's the most difficult one, because you might feel that your level of distress is quite high, but it might be more manageable than you first think of it, just because for whatever reason the threshold that you have, and it's not your fault. Is it does nothing to do with your moral constitution or anything like that. Some people feel guilty about this. It's like when you have a panic attack in the tube, and somebody and the paramedics come and tell you there's nothing wrong with your heart. How do you know? You don't know. You still need to see the paramedics. You see what I mean? That's exactly the right thing to do. But if your level of distress is such that is causing you a problem, I think that is another important signal to seek help and to find that consultation. And the consultation might result in saying, no, actually, we wait and see, or we try to get the basics right, or we do something that is not very invasive. Let's put it that way. We don't use medication. We don't, let's do this. And actually, that's I would say that's a good signal from your clinician. It's a clinician that doesn't want to intervene unless there is a real need, and any intervention that you care to name has some consequences to it. So I think you have to be very deliberate about that risk benefit analysis. If I give you something, is it going to be for your betterment, or not? And that's always a key question. Or would this, left to its own devices, recover? Which very often it does. These most of these conditions are self-limiting. They are. So that is an important thing. So you be prepared to just listen to that advice. Maybe keep it under review. Maybe come back later. Maybe see what's happening. But sometimes it might result in a recommendation for treatment. And if that happens, then it's about adhering to that treatment, and actually making sure that you apply yourself, like you've got in the slide, that apply yourself to that process when it's
mm.
recommended. But not everybody needs therapy. Let me put it that way. And so, in some people, it might be detrimental. For example, let's say that your readiness for therapy is just not there. Maybe you have a condition, but therapy might not be the right intervention. So a good well trained assessor might determine that this is not the right time for therapy. Maybe other interventions might be better. Maybe just in some cases, taking medication, taking an antidepressant might be the right intervention for you at this particular time. Yeah, not always. Often not. Often is not the first line, but it might be. Yeah.
Mm.
And actually, if you were to do therapy at that stage, it might actually backfire because you might say, "Oh, I've tried therapy and it didn't work for me." And then the next time when actually, somebody comes and says, "Yeah, no, actually now you are ready and you should have it," you already have that bad experience that actually predisposes you against it. So it makes it less likely to be successful. So that's also an
Mm.
important thing to take into account when making those decisions and making those recommendations. Yeah.
And I guess, and you can't um, paint everyone with the same brush here, but in private practice and private therapy, do you go through the same level of rigor to, if you like, qualify in or out that individual, or you've come to me, so I'm going to treat you, you know?
I mean,
Um,
it's difficult not to treat in private practice. Before I founded Thrive, I did have a small private practice. And the thing that I didn't like about it is that pressure that I felt. That sometimes I felt if I had been in my NHS job, I would have said, actually, we're just going to wait and see and not treat at this particular time because I don't see a real reason. Maybe I'll see you
mm,
again in a few months just to make sure. Or maybe maybe I just reassure you and give you some advice. And if you need me, just get your GP to refer back to me again, something like that, right? Whereas in private
mm,
practice, is really hard to do that.
yeah,
I mean, I still did it, but it was a constant. There is a constant pressure there to do something when maybe you feel that you shouldn't do anything. No.
yeah. Okay, coming into the latter stages of the webinar here. So there's actually a webinar that we want to highlight, and you'll get the copy of the slides and the recording. But we did a webinar with an external speaker, pretty well known in this space, Peter Kelly, on psychological health and safety. And really, the idea of this was to unpack it from two perspectives. The first, thinking about the clinical angle. So we do need to treat symptoms, but there are other things that go into thinking about that case. So we spoke about the formulation of cases, Andreas. Maybe we can keep that very high level, just in the interest of time.
Of time, yeah,
Um,
yeah.
yeah,
I'll try to do a very quick one. So yeah, treating systems, as you say, sometimes is very important because you do need to control them. Sometimes you cannot even do anything else until you control the symptoms. Yeah. So maybe you thinking therapy might be very useful, but you need to control the symptoms first because at that level of symptoms, they just cannot benefit from therapy. So that's very important. But what you were referring to there is having a good comprehensive formulation where you try to understand these individuals, not diagnosis, but what led them to experience this problem at this particular time. What are the predisposing factors that may come from a long time ago? What are the precipitating factors that started the condition? Yeah. And what are the perpetuating factors? What are the factors that are making the condition continue? Once you have a good idea of what those three boxes contain, you can then formulate your intervention based on that. You can say, okay, so I've got some predisposing factors. Maybe some of them I can do something about. Maybe some of them I can't do anything about. For example, I don't know, the risk of certain things is greater in men than women. And, that's a predisposing factor. Can't do anything about. Maybe age is a predisposing factor. Can't do anything about that. But
mm,
maybe there may be others that I can do things about. So it's about understanding that, right? And the precipitating I tend to be able to do things about. So maybe it's about eliminating those clear triggers that brought this condition about. So it's just thinking beyond what we're doing in the therapy, thinking about what we're doing beyond the consultation room. How do we eliminate these precipitating factors? And the same thing for the perpetuating factors. In fact, the perpetuating factors are the most important to eliminate. And that might be about lifestyle changes. It might be about we identify that something in your life is actually very likely to bring this problem about. And it's about how do we either minimize its effect or completely take it away. I mean, a simple example might be the particular job that you're doing is bringing a lot of stress and unhappiness, and it's about formulating solutions about how do we do this? Do we actually compensate for that, or do we find another job that is better suited to your personal circumstances, because this is going to constantly bring this problem up. It's a very simple, silly example, but it's just so people understand what I'm talking about. So that is
mm.
beyond the particular therapy or anything like that. It's more about understanding those factors and eliminating them. Yeah.
Thank you. And as I say, the webinar that's linked here goes into a lot more detail. It covers the ISO 45003. And in that webinar, it's really helpfully unpacked what things organizations can do. Maybe you work within these roles where you are looking for some of the signs, some of the warning signs within your workforce, within your working environment, that recommend that you do have a look at that webinar, and we'll share the link in the follow-up to that as well. So final bits of sort of interaction. So just want your thoughts for the people that are on the call, remaining on the call. We've got over 80 still on the call. So from an organizational perspective, and this is a two-way street, the employee does have responsibilities to look after themselves, to report things that might not be conducive to a healthy working environment. But what can organizations do to think about ways to structure support in a sustainable way? And I think we've got Slido just here, and then we'll give you some of our own thoughts and reflections on what organizations can do in this area. So if you wouldn't mind engaging with that, that'd be great. Root causes, yeah, fantastic. We need to understand where these problems actually are within the potential workplace that you work in. Checking in, and I mean that could be at a line manager level, that could be an employee to employee level, that could be at a leadership level. Psychological safety, we've got provision there, in-house psychologist. Get to know your team. Yeah, too right. Occupational health, yes, so these pathways that are there for employees. I would also say signposting of those things, effective communication. Um, Wellness apps, signposting, red flags, build into the culture. So what can the business do from a top down, but also bottom up perspective? Everyone can own that culture and define that. And we've got an example here of various things that are offered to this individual. Scheduled webinars, we'll take that.
Mhm.
So yeah, some really good comments and thoughts there. I'm going to move us on. So you've considered these. So what are the root causes? Yeah. So we have to understand where those stresses lie within the working environment, assessing for risks. There are various ways that you can do that. Some more direct anonymous surveys, for example. I think there's this area of education, mental health literacy, we've called it here, but training managers, leaders, how to have those conversations, role modeling behavior. Some people work in different, well, it's a very obvious thing to say. People work in different ways. So for one person, role modeling a certain behavior is going to help them. It's nuanced again, as this whole discussion is. And then we've got these ideas around making sure that there are protocols, there are frameworks, there's support on offer. And the final thing that we want to sort of highlight, and is a lot of the work that my team does, is when we're working with employers, is how we can create these longer term lasting strategies. So Thrive is a mental health service. You've heard a little bit about that, but essentially we provide access to talking therapy that's delivered virtually through an app, video, voice, and telephone call. And then we have tools that can help people identify challenges early. So to our earlier point around this discussion about how do we know when we're ill, or how do we know when we're struggling, we have some validated tools that sit within our app that can help get you to the right level of care at the appropriate time. And more often than not, that is sooner, because people sit on these challenges often for a long time. So I'm going to skip past that, but because primarily because it's meant to come before that slide. But I'm sure we would have got some good answers there. But the real long-lasting strategies, we need to think about, how do you keep these services that you offer visible to employees in a way that is conducive to the way that your business communicates and all the different challenges that you have within a working environment. Because once the confetti has gone around launch of a service, you need to keep promoting these things. So it's the customer success team's job to help organizations keep the profile of these services that you may offer to your employees visible. I can see a few people are getting involved here. Um, and there are various things that feed into this, but we need to have some information about what's going on in the workforce. We need to make sure that people are confident about what their responsibilities are within their working roles, and that they have the resources to do their jobs, that they have support available, and that there is a conversation, and that whether it's managers, leaders, etc., um, are role modeling some of the behaviors that they expect to contribute to a healthy working environment. And we've got a few suggestions here from employee surveys, QR codes of apps in the kitchens, wellness room. Yeah, so visibility. I've visited various workforces, and they to different varying degrees of energy that they put behind the promotion of services like Thrive. But it is really important that you keep that message out there on the intranet, etc. Um, to close then, our next webinar, I don't know if Martin's on the call. I had rumors that he might have been on this call. But anyway, we're running a webinar on the 5th of August, which is around driver wellbeing. So we typically run webinars every month. More often than not, we'd have a couple each month. This is our next one on the 5th of August. Do recommend that you sign up if that sounds interesting to you. And if you do have access to Thrive, just a reminder that you can download it with this QR code, and you will have a unique access code for your organization. So if you don't know what that is, you can get in touch with us, or you can speak to your representative within your respective organization. Or indeed, if you haven't got Thrive and you'd like to know a little bit more about it, feel free to reach out to us, and we will have a chat with you and see if we can help you out with what you've got going on at your organization. There's a couple of comments and questions. I do want to respect people's time. So obviously, if you have to drop off, feel free to do so. I'm just trying to have a quick scan in the chat, Andreas, and see if there's anything that um, we didn't pick up. So, so quite a few comments in here. Thank yous. Yeah, and I'll check the Q&A. Uh, we've got two questions in the QA that I think I'm going to pick up as separate ones and write to you both individually if we can get work with Ella to pick those ones up. In the interest of time, I think we'll do that. So for those two comments that we've got in our Q&A, if we can engage with you after the webinar, that would be fantastic. Otherwise, thank you for joining us all today. Hope you have a good afternoon. It's been insightful, informative. We've enjoyed chatting with you. And thank you to Andreas.
Thank you very much. Thanks for your attention and your questions and your comments. Thank you.